Hi, thanks so much, Yez, and thanks everybody for joining me today for my Raspberry Pi 101 presentation. This is going to be very similar to the last one I did, certainly in slide decks, but I have a lot of more updated information, and I plan to have this be a little more demo-driven than last time, so it should be a little more exciting. So just to get started, what I plan to show you through this call is exactly what a Raspberry Pi is, what you can do with it, what the potential is for it, and how you basically set one up from ordering it until you have it in your house and you want to get started with it. And once you have all that basic information, it should be enough for you or a kid or anyone to just take off with it and have a great time. And it's really one of the best $35 gifts you could get someone for the holidays, especially for someone younger who has an interest in computers or has an interest in games or playing games. This is the kind of device where they'll learn how to make the games themselves and play them. So the first question that always comes up to me is, what exactly is it? I've heard of these Raspberry Pis around, and I see there's some buzz about it, but what is it, and what's the big deal? And it's really not a big deal. It's actually quite a small little device, and it's a $35 personal computer without a case. But if you get a keyboard, some power, a small disk, and you plug everything into a monitor, then you have a fully functioning personal computer that accesses the internet, that runs programs, that can connect and talk to the physical world, and do everything that a computer does today. What's cool about the whole Raspberry Pi, in general, is the story behind it. In 2006, at the University of Cambridge, a group of professors came up with an idea to make a small, inexpensive computer that could be mass-produced and could be distributed out to children. They had discovered that there was a huge gap in the education between the kids that learned on Apple IIs and Commodore 64s and Timex Sinclairs back in the 80s and 90s, and the computers of today where everything's pretty automatic and people don't even necessarily use computers. They're just jumping right into cell phones and things. And you don't get the chance to explore the rudimentary basic functionality of personal computers. And this is really one of those devices that if we get out to everyone at such a low cost, especially to the kids, then they can start discovering what their talents are and what their abilities are with programming, discovering hardware and software, and communicating between computers and the physical world. So it's super exciting, the potential behind it, and what they've done since starting their manufacturing in 2011 is distributed over 1.75 million Raspberry Pis in the last 2 years. And all the new Raspberry Pis are being manufactured in a factory in the UK, and they're producing at least 5,000 a day. It was about a year ago that they could be very hard to come by, or you have to wait a long time, or they'd be back ordered from the stores. But now it's actually pretty easy to find. They're more accessible in retail stores. You don't necessarily have to order them online, but they definitely come a lot faster when you order them online than they did a year ago. So why would you want one, though? Well, there's a couple of reasons. It's really got the power of a PC that you would have paid $2,000 for 10 years ago. But it runs on very little power. It does everything that you would need a computer to do, and it's something that you just really don't have to worry too much about. When you go out and buy a nice laptop or a tablet or a cell phone or something like that, you've made an investment in the computer, in the device, and you definitely worry about it a little more than you would about a $35 computer. It's also very small. It's hardly bigger than an Altoids case. It almost fits into one, and it runs on an SD camera card. So what kind of things, what I like to do is actually show the relative comparison between personal computers, Raspberry Pis, and smartphones. And the performance is nothing great. It really does run like a computer from 2000. But if you're doing one thing at a time or two things at a time, then it actually works just fine. It streams video great. It plays audio fine. It does pretty much everything you would want a computer to do in its most basic form. The cost, $35 compared to a PC, which are usually hundreds of thousands of dollars, and smartphones, which are about $500, you can actually buy several Raspberry Pis and have them work together to make a more powerful computer and it could still cost you a fraction of what a PC or a smartphone could cost. The size is also very nice. It's super portable. It's easy to carry around. You could carry 50 of them in your backpack, even though you could never do that with laptops. So there's a lot of good advantages to the size and to portability of the entire device. And then finally, it's how risky can you be with it? If you lose your Raspberry Pi or break your Raspberry Pi, which would be very difficult to do, you'll be sad because you lost it, but you won't be as sad as if your computer fries or you drop your smartphone in a puddle or something like that. Those are really, really sad events. Relative to a Raspberry Pi, you can, for another $35, you can get a new one, and they're way more durable because there's no moving parts, and there's really not a lot to them. They run at very little power, and you can usually keep them in a small and safe place. So the biggest reason why this is such a big deal is for the educational value. And like I had mentioned, back in the 80s and 90s, we had a lot of low-level, we were learning about sprite programming, and we had basic, and a lot of stuff that's just not as popular or accessible today. And what the Raspberry Pi does is it brings a lot of technologies to people that either can't afford expensive computers or just don't either can't afford them or don't have consistent access to them. For $35 each, you can get these Raspberry Pis out to schools and out to less fortunate countries and places, and you can get these computers in kids' hands so that they can start discovering what sort of gifts they have with computers, and then they can get themselves into a position where they're the next computer experts, and they're designing the programs and the technology and the holograms and everything that's going to bring us to the flying cars of the future. So it's really the point of the Raspberry Pi is for it to be a catalyst for all the children and all the generations of people that need to get a chance to hold on to, pick up, and discover how to learn and use a computer and program it. From that, there's so many different things you can do. You can use it to drive a 3D printer. You can use it for general software programming. You can use it to analyze and gather statistics on temperature. You can use it to communicate with other people. There's just pretty much anything you can do with a $2,000 computer you could do with a Raspberry Pi. The other awesome thing about it is the community. The community has really taken off for the Raspberry Pi. There's so many people that have gotten behind it. There's so many great ideas. It really has been like a consistently viral and improving community and adoption, and that's what's been really great about it. And I'm going to jump over to one of my favorite places on the screen share here. Give me 1 second. Okay, so one of the best places that I've found is the Google Group's Raspberry Pi group. First of all, it's got 600,000 people in it almost, and every single day somebody puts up a great idea of what they've done with the Raspberry Pis or what they've seen someone else do with the Raspberry Pis. And you just blow your mind every day to see what some of the things you're like, wow, I wish I had thought of that, or I thought of that. Streaming, grabbing radio signals and streaming them to the internet. Making interesting artistic performance art type things. There are just so many things. Car computers, virtual guitar gloves for air guitar. I mean, people just come up with great ideas, and then they post them onto Google, and everybody shares them. It's a very encouraging environment. If you ever have questions, people are usually very responsive and active in trying to help you figure out what the problem is or pointing you to the right place on the internet to get to. Just a lot of great ideas, innovation, and a really strong community. And if you're not a part of the Google group, anybody can join, and there's just great ideas every day. And that's one of the things that makes it so much fun, is the large community and all the enthusiasm in the people that are getting involved in learning how to do things and creating just awesome things every day. Moving back to the slides. Okay. the other big thing is the innovation that comes with it. With the communities and all the people feeding off of each other and the social involvement, there have just been amazing innovations. People have made giant supercomputers, multi-core supercomputers. They've made completely autonomous or sovereign, like solar-powered Raspberry Pi computers. So basically, never need to plug them in. They're just constantly, continuously powered solar computer with a battery backup. People have put satellites out running Raspberry Pis. Bitcoin miners, though, there's probably the slowest Bitcoin miners in the world, but everybody will, there are just a lot of great ideas out there. And just like on the Google Group side, you just see more and more great ideas every single day. What can you do with it? So, and that's really the question. It's like you can do anything with it. It's a very small investment, but it has all the potential of a small computer that you can carry around. Once you've figured out what idea that you have, really the sky's the limit. It's so easy, and it's a lot of fun to get started. And as soon as anyone picks up a Raspberry Pi, they usually have a great idea that they come up with right away. And one that I wanted to share was my good friend actually posted, moving back into the screen share. So I have a good friend who, when he got his Raspberry Pi, he got it with the Raspberry Pi camera. And what he immediately wanted to do was set up a device that was battery powered that he glued to, that he stuck up to his windshield. And then as he drove around, he did what's called hyperlapse, which is you basically take a picture every 2 seconds, and then you speed it up and you play it on YouTube. And it makes some amazing videos. And this was something that he set up and played around with in a couple of days, and it was just, it was one of those great ideas. You're like, wow, I've had my Raspberry Pi sitting under my desk, and I haven't really been doing anything with it, and he's, taking it on trips to California and driving through everything and putting together these awesome video streams for basically a $50 investment if you include the camera as well. So, getting back to that, you can really do anything with it. And I really hope that a lot of you on the call decide to go and get one if you don't have one already, and then share your ideas out on the Internet and let people know what you're doing, because you'll see that everybody will love your ideas, and there'll be people that can find complementary ideas, and that's how this movement keeps going, and that's how more and more people get Raspberry Pis in their hands, learn how to have a lot of fun with this little $35 computer. Another question that comes up all the time is, what is the difference between Raspberry Pi and an Arduino? And I definitely, both of them are fun, and both of them have been huge in the last 5 or 6 years. They've both been extremely popular in the technical communities. The Arduino is effectively a microcontroller, and it's used for creating a program to run on a chip that is going to either drive motors and turn motors, or turn on lights, or crank gears or whatever, or read sensors, whether they're temperature sensors or light sensors or magnetic sensors. It could read lots of different things. The Arduino can do that on an analog or a digital basis. The Raspberry Pi is really a full computer. It's not just a microcontroller. It's a computer that starts up. It runs an operating system, just like if you're running Windows or on a Mac, it runs a very similar operating system to that, and it has lots of uses besides just being able to sense or drive things from its wiring. Now, the Raspberry Pi is able to do some digital manipulation, much like the Arduino can do, but what I find most people doing, if they want to do something where they're connecting to the physical world and they want to collect the data, they'll do that with an Arduino, and then they'll interface that with a Raspberry Pi to actually make the data meaningful, or to process the data, or to display it on a website, or to actually go and, read through it or something like that. So they work great together, But if you had to pick one or the other, I would probably start with a Raspberry Pi. That's something that if you get that and a few accessories, you basically have a computer, and then you can really take it from there. With an Arduino, there's a little bit more of a learning curve, and I think you'd be more comfortable working with Arduinos if you were able to successfully set up and play around and hack away at a Raspberry Pi. So they're both great technologies and things that everybody should get more involved in, because the things that we're doing with we're tracking our health better using sensors, and we're just doing so many things with small computers, and both Arduino and Raspberry Pi are a big part of that. Both have a very strong community and everything. So let's say you're thinking about buying a Raspberry Pi. There are a lot of places that will sell kits to you, and they have the regular kits and the super deluxe kits, and really try and keep it in the spirit of the Raspberry Pi and keep your costs low. You don't need a ton of accessories. The Raspberry Pi camera is super cool, so totally see wanting one of that. But if you go out and buy a $150 kit, then you're probably getting a lot of things that you didn't really need, like a super glossy case and an expensive power supply or a $20 HDMI card. You don't need anything fancy at all. In the spirit of the maker movement, there's probably a lot of people that would suggest you could find these things already in your house somewhere, and you could put everything together to make your Raspberry Pi run. I mean, certainly there's no shortage of keyboards and mice in the world. Things like that are, not things you inevitably need to order in a kit. But really, when you first order it, you want to go a little bit minimalist, and there's just some essentials that you need to get started. For one, you'll need an SD card, and those are basically the larger camera cards, and it needs to be 4 gigs minimum, but I would say start with an 8 gig one, and if you find, and they're relatively inexpensive, I would just grab 2, because you'll have one that you could run anything on, and then you can have another one that's sort of like your test Raspberry Pi system, and we'll get into why you might want to have one of those in a little bit. You're going to need something that you could write to the SD card with, so a lot of PCs already have those sorts of slots built in. Otherwise, they do make USB ones that you just plug your SD card in and they talk to your existing computer so that you can write the image of the operating system to the SD card. You're going to need a monitor and a monitor with either HDMI or an old school video RCA cable. Either one will work. Obviously, if you have an HDMI, it'll have better resolution, but it really depends on what you have and what you have available to you. You're going to need a power supply, and basically that's a standard USB, the mini USB, it's a micro USB charger, and a 5-volt 1-amp is sufficient to run everything, and that's really all it needs. You don't have to spend a lot of money on buying a fancy one of those. Of course, you need a keyboard and a mouse to get started, and a network cable to plug in. You can, instead of a network cable, you can get a USB Wi-Fi adapter, and that's certainly good, but you want to make sure that you get one that's compatible, and I'm going to show you a site where that's very easy to figure out. And then finally, a powered USB hub is nice to have. What I've found is that when you're running a lot of things, like you've got your mouse and your keyboard, and you've got your hard disk drive, and you've got an extra couple of things, you're going to want a hub, and then you're going to want a power because you don't want to draw all the power from your single power source on your Raspberry Pi. I've found that one of the biggest troubleshooting things that comes up is are related to power problems, and it's from the accessory is drawing too much power. Another thing that you need are cases. Of course, the case that you really want to make is either a 3D printed case or a case made out of Lego, because that's the most fun. You could definitely buy cases, and that's okay, but, I mean, really, what's more fun than making a computer case out of Lego? I would highly recommend that. If you have a friend or you have your own 3D printer, there are a ton of different models for cases out on Thingiverse, so I would say that would be your next best way to go. Or you can order cases, or definitely come in the super deluxe kits, and you can get anything you want. And if you don't want, you don't have to have a case at all. That's always an option too. You really just plug it in and have it sit there, and it will do fine. So cases just kind of give it a little more personality, and you can put stickers all over them or do whatever you want. So cases are always the fun part. But don't spend a lot of money on one, and the more creative you are, the more personal your own little Raspberry Pi is anyway. So now we get into setup. You've got your Raspberry Pi, you've picked up all your essentials, and you need to get things set up. And in my last presentation, I said just go get an image of Raspbian, and it's pretty easy to do. But the Raspberry Pi Foundation has set up the new system, which is new out-of-the-box software. And it's really awesome to use, and it's so easy to set up. So basically, you go and download that, and you write it to disk. And I'm going to jump back over to Screenshare. Show you a couple of things here. First, the Raspberry Pi Hub at elinux.org is amazing. There's so much information here that you can pretty much get all the information that you need to get started and to find out what you need. And one thing I did mention was this is the site that has all of the supported peripherals and devices. So if you need to make sure that your USB Wi-Fi adapter is compatible, this is the place you go, and it will give you a list of exactly what's compatible and what's not compatible. And then a lot of the kits will give you something that's already certified as compatible, or the websites that you go to will usually show you the compatible devices, but this is always the place you can go and double check. Or if you happen to have one at home already, this is the place where you can see if it is or is not going to work and how to get it set up. So the eLinux site for the Raspberry Pi Hub is an amazing resource, especially once you start getting more into using the Raspberry Pi and more into advanced controlling and things like that. So I highly recommend that. But the new out-of-the-box software is here. And basically, this is on the Raspberry Pi org site under the download section. So it's the first thing you'll see in downloads. And it is basically you download the image, you unzip it onto your SD card, and then that's really all you need to do for setting up your SD card. There is a formatting tool from the SD Card Association that you can use on Windows or Mac to clean off any SD card you have. If you have an old one, it'll format it so that you can put this onto that SD card and you take it from there. Once you do that, it takes you to a menu screen, and it's going to show you, I think it's 8 different choices of operating systems that you can load and use for your Raspberry Pi. The first one that will come up will be Raspbian, and this is the recommended one. It's recommended for anybody who's new with a Raspberry Pi, and essentially this is a kind of a light form of Ubuntu. It's very similar to, and you'll find that it has all of the programs and things that you would want to get started and really discover how to use it and how to play around with it and how to hack away at it. So pretty much everybody recommends to use this as the first one. If you're already a Linux user or you want to be a little more adventurous, there are a lot of other choices that you have once you load up the new software, and it'll install any one of these for you. Pidora is a version of Fedora, and it's another Linux distribution, but you'll find that they have a lot of similarities and there's a few differences. If you really don't know the difference, you don't have to worry about it so much. I would say start out with Raspbian. But if you're a little more experienced in Linux and you want to go with more of a Fedora feel, then Pidora would be the way to go. RISC OS is moving a little more advanced. RISC was created to run on an ARM processor. So it is, I don't believe it's open source, but you can run it on your Raspberry Pi and you'll find that it's a different experience, but that's a little definitely more for the technical user. Some of the cool ones down here, though, RasBMC is actually a media center, and that's another choice that you have is you can take your Raspberry Pi and install RasBMC on it, and then it turns it into a small media center, internet-connected media center. It works with Android devices, I believe, and you basically plug it into your television and use that as a streaming media player, similar to like a Google Chromecast or something like that. And it's an open-source project that it's actually a very nice way to run internet-based stuff on your television. Arch Linux is for the minimalist, and that's like what I've noticed is it's super fast on a Raspberry Pi. But one thing is that it doesn't install a lot of programs. So this isn't something that is for a new user. This is something that's for a more experienced Linux user. But you will find that if you are a more experienced Linux user, you might really enjoy using Arch on the Pi, or Arch on the Pi. Yeah. And finally, one of the last choices is OpenELEC, and this is another version of the open source media center. So similar to RasBMC, you'll find that this is something that you can use with your computer and with your video files and on the network to stream things to your television. And it's another great distribution, and it's something that if you go look up Media Center for Raspberry Pi on the Internet, you'll find a ton of resources on how to set it up, how to tweak it, and really what to do with it. But it's just another one of those things that's been Raspberry Pis have been commonly used for as they become more and more popular. So once you load up the new software, you get all these choices, and I would say definitely go with your Raspbian, and then it's going to take you through an install process. It's going to explain a few things. You restart, and that's basically all you have to do. And what you'll get out of it when you start is something that looks like this, and it's just a basic command line screen. You'll see a lot of stuff that comes up beforehand, and then the first thing that comes up after you see all the text screen by is the Raspberry Pi software configuration tool. And this is another thing that they've made really easy to just set up. First, expand file system. This is something that you can do already, or it won't let you do it. So you're probably using noobs. So if you're using noobs, you skip this step. You can change your user password. By default, the user password are Pi and Raspberry. So this is where you would change your user password to give yourself a little more security. If you want to set your computer so that when it starts up, it goes right to a desktop, a Windows desktop, instead of just having the text command line, that's the way to do it. This is where you can set up your keyboard and make sure that you're using the right time zone, keyboard layout, and locale for the country that you're in. So it really is made for someone who's not familiar with Linux to be able to come in and set up the obvious things that they would want to set up. They've definitely made considerations for, they're expecting everyone over the world to be familiar with these. So they make it super easy just to get everything set up right off the bat. And then once you do this, if you finish, it's going to ask you if you want to restart. You probably will, and you'll get back here. From here, this is a typical, it's just a normal Linux machine. So you can do all of the normal commands that you would use to look at a Linux box. But for anybody that's like, oh my goodness, this is way, way, way too technical, the only thing you have to worry about is typing this once, Start X, and that's going to take you into your Windows system, which is something that you're probably a little more familiar with. And so here is that same computer and a Windows system. And as you can see, it looks like any Mac or Windows system. It's got a start looking button, and it's got a lot of programs that already come in. And this is actually the installation of Raspbian. So going through here a little bit, there's a couple of awesome programs, and this is where you really see how it's made for kids. First, Scratch. Scratch is a programming language. It was written in MIT. You don't have to have a Raspberry Pi to use it. You can go download it now and run it on any system. But it runs great on a Raspberry Pi. And really, this is the basic of the 80s, or the sprite language on the TIs of the 80s and 90s. It's really just it's an objects-oriented, event-driven programming language that's catered for kids and people that just want to learn very basic examples of how to program things. And it comes with a lot of cool different sample programs. And so right to the robot. And essentially, with this programming, you can Scratch you can use to communicate with external devices. You can use it to control Lego robots. You can use it to bring in temperature information or sensor information if you have this integrated into a Raspberry Pi. Or you can use it just to make software. You can make games, or you can make animations like this. And essentially, it's made to tune a child's mind to understand how object-oriented and event-driven programming works. And once that understanding is developed, it becomes very easy to move into more advanced programming languages. And another thing that, so Scratch, great thing for everybody should go play with Scratch. It's fun for everyone. And it's one of the things that comes as soon as you install a Raspberry Pi. Great for teachers, great for kids. And once you get to that point, then you can actually move into Python, which is a higher level programming language, and you can actually learn how to program things that professionals would be using today in the workplace. And it really is that fast of a transcription. If you really got good in Scratch, a lot of the concepts and fundamentals that you would learn there, you would be able to apply in writing Python. And as it is catered for kids, it starts out with games that are available for you to not only look at the programs of, but you can actually go and play. So it's truly a computer that has a child in mind. It says, oh, you want to play some games? Awesome. Let's play some games. You want to look at how the game was created and make your own game? Well, here's the place that you can do that as well. And then from a computer using perspective, it comes with a lightweight browser, and it runs acceptably well. This isn't something where you're going to want to surf the internet all the time. You can't have, if you're like me on my machine at home, I have 30 tabs open. The Raspberry Pi will just die if you try and do that. So it's something that you could do some quick surfing with, or if you're in a place where, in a low power area where you happen to have internet access, then this is a way you can actually get connected. But really, it's not the fastest thing in the world, but it's not horrible. And surprisingly, I can't really show you here, but it actually plays video very well. So it's another thing that it's tuned very well for our audio and video replay. And you'll find that if you get one of your own and hook it up, it actually performs better than you'd probably expect. Okay, jumping back up here for a second. So just to recap, start out with noobs. If you run into any questions, there's a lot of community sites, and they can step you right through it, or they'll point you to the instructions that show you how to do it. The instructions for setting these things up have been spectacularly done. They're really easy to follow and straightforward, so it's something that you shouldn't have any problem with. If you're not technical at all, it's something that you'll be able to pick up quickly. If you're getting this for your kid and you're not technical, they'll probably figure it out in like 5 or 6 minutes. So the setup, and I kind of jumped forward a little bit, but in the setting it up, really all you have to do is hook up the power last. I would say if there's any advice I could give, it's power last. Everything else you want to plug in, so you're either going to plug into an HDMI monitor or a RCA jack monitor. You can plug in speakers if you want. You're going to have your mouse and your keyboard at a minimum, and a network cable. And once you plug it all in with your card, your noobs card, everything will start up, and it works great. The Raspberry Pi site has a great quick start that is 5 times better than the one I just showed you. So that's really you can always refer to the Raspberry Pi site, and you'll find that it is just it's an amazing resource, and they are continuously updating it. So it's definitely the place to go when you want to get started. These are a couple of slides that I show in case my demo's mom, which fortunately they didn't, but we've got Python and Scratch, just a lot of fun and absolutely stuff that's catered for kids. So something that every kid and teacher should get into, and if you know a kid that doesn't have a Raspberry Pi for the holidays, well, now's the time to order them because they'll probably be back ordered in like the next week. Finally, so troubleshooting is another thing that comes up a lot with people that ask me about Raspberry Pis. And it's usually the number one thing is power. If you have a fancy keyboard or mouse, something that lights up or has an LCD screen or extra keypad or something, you'll usually find that it draws too much power for the Raspberry Pi, and then it'll do something weird, like it'll make the internet stop working or something like that. It won't actually power itself off. It'll just you'll find one of two things: either internet will stop working, or the keys will continue pressing. So you press A, and it just gives you a string of A's, and then it stops, even though you only hit it once. So it's super frustrating, but usually that just means that the stuff that you're using is too nice. So find something that is just super low-end keyboard or mouse, and that's usually the easiest way to go, and it also guarantees that you won't have any power issues. Also, a USB-powered hub is another safe way to go, even though I've had some USB-powered hubs that still don't handle some of the some of the nicer keyboards, so you have to be careful there. There are some compatibility things, but again, with compatibility, the resource to go to is absolutely, getting back into Screenshare here. Where is the resource? Here, the elinux.org Raspberry Pi Verified Peripherals. You will find everything you need to know here about any possible thing that you want to plug into a Raspberry Pi. And it's not just limited to keyboards and SD cards, but it goes on and on to joysticks, numeric keypads, fingerprint readers, docking stations. They really expanded this a lot. So this is another community project. So you find that the energy and enthusiasm behind keeping this stuff updated is amazing. It's really inspiring, and as more and more people get the Raspberry Pis and get inspired behind it, then we find more information comes in here. More people are coming up with great solutions for everything. And so once you started doing that, you can go into the Noob system, and if you got that second SD card, you can install it on another card, and then pick another distribution besides Raspbian and see how it's different. Or if you want to get really adventurous, you could use PiMain, which is the arcade emulator that runs on the Raspberry Pi, so that it'll replay old arcade games, 8 and 16-bit arcade games. OpenELEC and Raspbian MC, they're all really fun ways to discover not only open source projects in Linux operating systems, but just general using hardware and software in a more advanced way. But it's more challenging, fun, and exciting in the end. And so I hope that you really decide to go out and get a Raspberry Pi and run with it, and then share your results, because everybody is so enthusiastic about seeing new things created and new great ideas, and seeing how we get this out to more people and more visibility, so that hopefully, there's a day where every kid has a chance to, walk into school and start playing with a computer, learning how to program, and seeing if that's something that they enjoy, they're gifted at, and that they want to continue with going on, because it is a lot of fun growing up and being in computers too. So I highly endorse it. So first of all, I want to thank everybody for listening to me through this whole presentation. And I hope you enjoyed the demos and all the information. And so now I'm going to move into questions and answers. And so continue posting questions. And if there's a question or something that I didn't get to, or something that you want to ask somewhere else, you can reach me at any of these places, and most of the time I'll get back to you very quickly. I just actually realized from last webcast that a couple of emails had gone into my junk email, and I just caught them recently, and I was able to respond. So if you don't hear from me right away, then you'll hear from me as soon as I get back to my junk email folder. Anyway, so let's move into questions and answers.
Excellent presentation, Ed. Really great information there and lots of fun as well. Are you able to see the questions, or should I read them for you?
No, I can see them here. Let's see. Start at 1, right? Okay. Question 1. How would I compare the Raspberry Pi to the latest BeagleBoard? It's a great question. Actually, one of my colleagues just was talking to me about his BeagleBoard Black, and they're very similar. They're both ARM processors. The BeagleBoard, I believe, and I don't have one myself, but I believe is a little closer to the integration between Arduino and a higher level operating system. So you can run an operating system on the BeagleBoard, and you can run pretty much anything from a Linux perspective that you could run on the Pi, but it seems to be a little easier to incorporate contacting analog devices in the physical world. It's a little bit more expensive, but if you're a little more technical, then it's not necessarily a bad investment. I think that they're both great devices, and they're both part of that maker movement and Internet of Things that has become such a hot topic lately. And if you have one or the other, I think you'll find it a satisfying experience. If you're a little less experienced in hardware and computers and that sort of thing, the Raspberry Pi seems very tuned towards teaching people. So that might be where there's a slight advantage over the BeagleBoard, but truly it's my ignorance of that community that they may be just as active and energetic and helpful in their community as well. But I would say that they're both very comparable and both good things to have and to get and play around with. Good question, though. What is a great first project for children ages 9 to 12 years? Truly, I have to say that Scratch is, so a lot of 9 to 12-year-olds will amazingly be able to probably set up the Raspberry Pi before their parents can, right? But let's see here. Finding my window again. There, okay. Scratch has just some very great introductory programs. Like I showed you the dancing robots. The last time I did this, I went to a program which I thought was super cool because think of kids 9 to 12 years old. This seems like it would be a great place to start. Or it really depends on what class you're teaching too. The Hello in Many Languages is basically, get him loaded here. So this little program actually has Scratch the Cat say hello in all these languages, and then it broadcasts all of these in the languages, I believe. And so he goes through and speaks in different languages, and it looks complicated, but actually from an introductory perspective, and if you look at the Scratch website that's set up by MIT, I think they have lesson plans in them and everything, and you'll be able to find a very easy way to get a kid introduced into programming, and then from there, there's 100 different things that they could come up with to actually, expand their mind and become more active in it. So it's not going to be for everybody probably, but I would say that if I were going to if I were going to first introduce kids to a computer and programming, then I would definitely start with Scratch. They've done just a ton of good stuff with that language. Okay, next question. Oh, that's why. Okay. How open is the hardware design of the Pi? Good question. I'm pretty sure that the design itself is proprietary, and so it's not an open source design per se, but they've released a lot of information on it, and it is on an ARM chip, and it's not so complex that I think that it's, I believe if you go to the Raspberry Pi blog, I read about this a long time ago, and it's proprietary, but there were some very specific reasons for that, and I think the important thing is that the operating systems are all completely open source, so with the exception of RISC. And that's where you'll really find the power and awesomeness of using this device is in the open source software you're running on it. The lack of open sourceness of the board itself, I think, is minimal compared to the fact that it's so accessible to everyone because it's so inexpensive, and they're able to mass produce it so well. Okay, next question. Good question so far. You're definitely stumping me this time. I can feel it coming here. Why does my Pi want me to run idle as root? Any way around that? Huh. That is good. See, I knew I was going to get stumped. I'm not sure why it would want you to run idle as root. As a matter of fact, I just opened idle on this, and well, I'm actually running as Pi, so that's true. So that would be a root user. Good question. That is probably a good question for a Pythonista that would I would hit like the Python community and see if they know the answer to that question. I'm definitely not highly experienced in Python, and even less so in pseudo security. So yes, you definitely stumped me on that question. But I would definitely try the Python forum somewhere. They should be able to answer your question. Next question. I know a Raspberry Pi works great for Python and Scratch, but how is it with JavaScript and especially Node? Actually, my friend that has the Beagle board is running Node on his Beagle board, and it totally inspired me to run Node on a Raspberry Pi. I'm betting that it'll run okay. JavaScript, I think it should run fine. I've seen implementations of the Pi running full on Java, and it definitely takes a hit. But there's no reason why it shouldn't be able to run Node. But I'll bet you that that's out in the internet too. There are people that are running it. If you have something that's going to be relatively small and light, I don't see why there would be any reason that it couldn't handle it. Certainly good for like prototyping. It may not be something, if you're expecting to have 10,000 users hit it all at once, then that would be one thing. But yeah, for prototyping or small executions, I think it would be fine. On the Mac OS X, on some modern iMacs, they already have a built-in SD card reader. Wouldn't that and the Apple supplied Mac OS X disk utility do the same thing for wiping the SD card? Yes. As a matter of fact, I'm using a MacBook Pro and it has built-in SD card reader. If you have a built-in one, totally works fine. I have always liked using the SD formatter tool just because I jump between operating systems a lot. So, but whatever you want to use to format the disk should be fine. You can also, if you're a Linux user, you can also format it. You can format it using the command line tools. So there's several different ways you can do it. I was kind of just covering the easiest ones. Question: is it possible to switch OS installed on the same SD card by Noobs 1.3 headless? I believe answer is no. Or at least I haven't done it that way. I'm pretty sure that you can't switch the operating systems like that, though I feel like they're eventually going to get to a point where they make that possible. It's just that it hasn't materialized to that quite yet. But pretty much once you install the operating system from noobs, then you're kind of stuck to it, which is why it's always good to have a second card. Another good question, though. Question: do all the Raspberry Pi boards have USB and Ethernet ports by default, unlike Arduino? So there's an original model Raspberry Pi, which I don't think anybody has, and I'm sure is not in production anymore, and it doesn't have an Ethernet port, but it has USB ports. But so to answer your question, like anything that you order today is going to have both the USB and Ethernet port. Yes. What is the maximum usable SD card memory I can use with a Raspberry Pi? That's a good question. And that is definitely going to be somewhere in the, I would expect that to be somewhere in elinux.org. What I would say is it's going to be whatever the limitation of the operating system or the file format that you're using is. So it may depend on how you format the card more than how big it is. But I don't know that there's any specific limitation to how large of an SD card you could put in there. Are there battery packs for the Raspberry Pi? That's a good question, and they're all good questions. Yes, essentially there have been a lot of battery packs out lately that are used for charging cell phones, and they're usually about the size of a cell phone, and they're the equivalent of 6 or 7 cell phone batteries, and those will power Raspberry Pis perfectly. I use one to power mine all the time, and they work great. And some people have even incorporated solar panels with those rechargeable battery packs so that you never really have to draw from a power source to continually charge it. So absolutely you can use, or like a lot of the makers would say, make your own battery pack, and I'm sure that there's designs out there as well. How is the Pi's support for the BSD OSs? I don't know, actually. That's another good question. Like, they haven't posted, there haven't been any BSD Raspberry Pi OSs released, I don't think. So anything that basically, no, there's an ARM version. So anything that will run on an ARM chip can conceivably run on a Raspberry Pi. So I would say that hasn't been something that they've been big to publish, but if you go out on the internet and if BSD is something you're into, then there's definitely one that you can run on an ARM, so it should definitely run on a Pi. Question: I heard there were problems with constantly powering and unpowering via the connector. Hopefully not, because there's no other way to unpower it, with the exception of the USB port. There's no power switch on it or anything like that. I plug mine in and unplug it all the time, and I haven't run into any issues. Though I suppose conceivably, over time, you could break the connector, or you could hit it with spark it, or something like that. But there are some. There's a couple different ways you can solve that. You can either have a USB power that can be turned on and off, which effectively does the same thing. I think there were also power switches that are sort of add-on devices that you can use with the Raspberry Pi. But I haven't really heard of any direct issues with just how the power works. It's just very, very simple in that regard. Next question. Just wondering if this could be implemented in a Windows environment with a network login. I believe that you can. Let's see. I would say the short answer is yes, probably. You could get LDAP authentication running on the Raspberry Pi, and then it should work off of a network login. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't. If not, then yeah, then you would just have to use the standard, user information. But I haven't done any research on that, but I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be possible like it would be with any Linux-based distribution. Interesting question, though. Can you program the Raspberry Pi in Java? Yes, you can program it anything you want. It's not the fastest thing in the world, but you can absolutely do it. And there is a ARM version of Java that you can use. So actually, I was at a conference, and LinkedIn had a bank of Raspberry Pis. It was like 12 or 15 of them that they were using to run a Hadoop cluster, and those all run on a Java virtual machine. So it is definitely possible to do. Probably not the ideal device for running it, but still, like, it's kind of one of those things, if you can do it, why not try it? Can it be used with asterisks in a production environment? Probably not. It would depend on what you mean by production environment, like how large it is and how busy it gets. Like, for that price, you could certainly bring yourself enough redundancy to make it production worthy, but I think that you would probably run into performance issues. Can I use the Raspberry Pi with my TV or my monitor, or do I need accessories for them? If yes, please tell me what would be the accessories. So with your television, if you have an HDMI port on your television, then it'll absolutely work with that. If you have just a standard RCA video port, it will also work with that. If not, if you're using essentially RF modulation, then you would need an RF modulator to video RCA. And if your monitor is VGA, then you would want a digital DVI to VGA adapter, and I believe those are pretty commonly available. I think that was my last question.
Okay, I'm just peeking here to see if anything else has come out. Well, it looks like we have one final one here from John. Have you heard about the Raspberry Pi supercomputer created by the Southampton guys? And he gives a little URL. Do you know anything about that, Ed?
Not too. I haven't looked. Like, I've seen a bunch of people put up multi-node computers for fast processing, but I haven't seen a specific supercomputer one. But I definitely will check that out afterward. That sounds super interesting.
Excellent. And with that, folks, we're going to say a really big thank you to Ed for giving us his time today and for giving outstanding webcast, for sharing all his knowledge and expertise. Thank you so much, Ed.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
And folks, on the screen there, you can see we have the slide up again with Ed's contact information. And as you heard, he's happy to follow up with you if you send him an email or contact him on Twitter, Google+, etc. So it's right there for you. Folks that attended today, we thank you for attending and hope you benefited from it. And also, we'd like to let you know that we did push out a couple URLs there. We talked a lot about Scratch, so we pushed out some URLs to some really great Scratch books that O'Reilly has. And we also pushed out a little discount code. So if you didn't open your group chat, please do open it. There's a code in there to save you some money, and that's good for books and videos from O'Reilly. And if you are interested, as a lot of you mentioned, getting your nieces and nephews, as well as children, to get interested in programming and to learn, you can use that code on some of those Scratch books and our other Raspberry Pi books. Again, thank you, Ed. Thank you, everyone. This will conclude today's webcast. Goodbye, everybody.